President-elect Biden or then President Biden gives his first State of the Union speech, he's going to have Nancy Pelosi, Congresswoman from California, and Kamala Harris, Vice President from California, Senator. So in some ways, two women from California will be represented in that apex of power within the American government. The presidency, the vice presidency, and the Senate. That's a powerful, powerful image.
Powerful image, but it's just an image, right? You have to look at who their
Hey, we were just talking about the patriarchy, man. This is you see women in control, power, boom, lideresas,
no that
chingonas.
that's important, man. But you have to look at who's backing them, who are their corporate sponsors, because that's ultimately
Yeah, they're a
that's
little
who
more
they'll respond
moderate.
to.
They're a little more moderate, but hey, man,
Yeah, we'll see.
progress is progress. And you're listening to the Brown Perspective. This is your host, Eduardo, and I'm here with RO.
Hello, hello, ¿cómo estamos?
¿Cómo estamos? ¿Cómo estamos? Listos, ready to celebrate Thanksgiving. So, on today's topic, we give thanks for the 2020 election finally being over. So, part of today's episode is going to be, talking about some of the post-election results and reflections. Part of what, we had taken a hiatus. Part of it was just to let the results settle and see what would happen. But I have to give credit to Herreo for his prediction on the reaction of the man child, I believe he has said in the past, because he certainly hizo una pataleta.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Good Lord.
how's it going with these lawsuits, by the way? He has
No
like 30,
bueno.
over 30 different lawsuits, and a lot of them are getting dismissed.
They're sweating bullets or, tinte de pelo.
Yeah. Look, they don't have anything. And this is what we talked about 2 weeks ago when we were mentioning that he's going to throw his tantrum. He's going to make it seem like it's an illegitimate election. But at the end of the day, very little in the way of proof that there was any type of meddling, fraud. I did say before that had it been a situation like in Florida where the margin is so narrow, then maybe you could find a way to throw out votes. But it's gonna be a difficult. It's still ongoing, but like the writing's on the wall. Nothing's gonna come of this. So
Very
glad
true.
to
So
see. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that it just highlights how much this administration and this election challenged norms and laws. So, but luckily, it looks like the laws, the processes, withstood this test. But I think it should definitely be a red flag for all of us to think about. Okay, things could get bad. We need to make sure that our institutions and we as voters help bring about and strengthen our democracy. That's my idealistic urge today.
My urge is to rant a little bit on the Democrats and tell them to stop doing shit like Russiagate, because that also starts conditioning the population to think that our elections are not fair, right? Think about what it did to the American population for 4 years, telling them that there had been interference from a foreign government that had given some type of advantage to Trump in some way or another. Like it messes with the credibility or the perception that people have about the legitimacy of elections. So yeah, the Democrats did it too, just on a slightly a different level. What Trump was doing was just more out in the open and not conceding. It's way worse. But the Democrats should also learn from this to tone it down a bit.
Wow. So are you saying the Democrats were the little kid who called wolf or exaggerated the threat, and that enabled some of the things that happened?
I don't know if they enabled him. Yeah, you could say, yeah, it was a bit of enabling, maybe. That
Yeah.
you can criticize Trump, but if we're going to be fair, we need to criticize the Democrats also for yelling Russia, Russia, Russia for 4 years. never any proof, solid proof. They never really put into perspective how whatever amount of money Russia put into the social ads or whatever else they did to interfere with our election, how that pales in comparison to the millions that gets put into the propaganda machine that is internal to the United States, like in our own in-house propaganda machine. And I was listening to this author a few days ago. I forget his name, where he was on CNN and someone accused him of being an apologist for Russia because he was speaking out against people claiming that Russia had interfered in our elections. And he said, well, if you want to talk fairly, yeah, there was Russian interference. And actually, that started back in 1917 when the CIA, and then he started talking about the history of how the United States has meddled in the affairs of Russia and how Russia has meddled in our affairs and how it's been ongoing. So there's really nothing new in that sense, right? That they were just, for this cycle, they decided to focus on it so much, when in reality, that type of low-level meddling, it's always been happening. Nothing new there. Nothing new to see.
Yeah, that's true. No, so that's a good point, but it's still, because it's happened, it does prove that there's a legitimate reason to be concerned about it. But I'll give you the point that perhaps the Democrats and others on the left went too far with that. At the same time, we got to acknowledge that obviously that what occurred with this campaign is an exaggeration and a revelation of the internal threat, our own threat to the election process. And I think with exaggerating claims, unfounded evidence about the election results. So I think was a sitting American president saying those things. In some ways, the threat is even more damaging because it's one of your own doing that. So it's like even within the family, when you have somebody who just does something or creates an environment that is not healthy or productive for the family, that's precisely what's happened. So I think that it's interesting that we're having this conversation, and I know there's a number of other themes and things that we wanted to cover in today's post-election reflection episode.
Yeah, one of the other ones is how Trump was able to increase his support from Latinos and African Americans. So I think
Latino voting bloc.
With black people, he increased it to 8%. That's depending on where you read, it could be 2 to 4 percentage points. And then for Hispanics, it was from 28% in 2016 to 32% in 2020.
So should we call it the 50 Cent, Ice Cube, Lil Wayne, Chingo Bling effect?
I don't think so. Look, I think it speaks more to the inability of the Democrats to give blacks and those Hispanics anything that they can vote for. Mm-hmm. So,
and also something to vote against, because I think as we touched briefly on one of the previous conversations on the elections, they did talk about socialism, both in Cuba, Venezuela, and other parts of Latin America. So they did tap into that very, very fear. And I think to this point, while, we want to understand and continue to evolve our understanding of how the Latino community voted and what's important to them, I think also acknowledging that it's interesting that the whole media focuses on what the minorities did versus the fact that you had a large majority of white evangelical Protestants and others who still supported 45. And it's interesting that not as much attention has been put on them, except for, I know that just today I listened to an episode on NPR on Code Switch that sort of talked about the whole coverage and this perception, this narrative that's out there around emphasizing the impact of brown and black voters in 2020 in the 2020 elections.
Yeah, the issue of religion that definitely overlaps with a lot of Latinos. The
Mm-hmm.
the law and order message also. So you had all of the riots and the protests. Not riots, the protests with some rioting, and a lot of Latinos are pro. I think law and order is like code word for criminalizing poor communities. So that's why I
Yep.
don't really like it's such a broad. It covers so much, but at the end of the day, I think that as you get into a particular segment of Latinos, they do lean conservative because they have that mentality that oh, black people are just criminals, so they get what they deserve. Oh, immigrants were doing this, so they get what they deserve, lock them up. Or even young people were smoking pot or doing drugs, so they need to. They have this very simplistic view of it, and at least when it comes to how they view African Americans, it's mixed in there with like just the inherent racism in the Hispanic culture as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, the law and order message, that's also a reason why that resonated with Latinos as well, because a lot of them are conservative slash racist also, and when it comes to that over criminalizing poor communities. And then what was the other one? They the obviously the pandemic. So the Democrats being for shutting things down,
Mm-hmm.
and the Republicans being for individual freedom and trying to put out that message that no, that there shouldn't be lockdowns, that this thing that we're handling it incorrectly. So that also could have played into it. Um, but at the end of the day, I agree with you. I think that if the support for Trump increased, I think people should stop acting surprised.
Mm-hmm.
At least when it comes to Latinos, I'll speak for Latinos, not for Black people, but they should stop being surprised when it comes to Latinos because uh, Latinos, as we mentioned before, we're not a monolithic group. We don't vote on the same issues, and if the increase for Trump supports or in general for the Republicans, that just means that the Republicans are putting out a better message. Stop pretending like Latinos, or stop assuming that Latinos are going to vote Democratic just based on issues like immigration and um, maybe healthcare, or what are the other issues that they think that Latinos are going to vote Democratic for? Social
Mostly
programs,
immigration.
yeah, right. But that in a way is a little insulting for them to say that. Hey, what's going on with Latinos? Why did they all of a sudden start voting? Why did they come out more in favor of Trump 4 years later? Like, what's wrong with them? Why are they doing that? Like, if there's something wrong with that, right? It's saying that Latinos should be voting Democratic, and I've been a proponent of saying no, Latinos should be able to vote for whichever party they want, and preferably, if it were up to me, they would vote for neither of these parties. But we don't owe Latinos, we don't owe the Democratic Party our vote, and they need to give us something so we can vote for them. So um, I think I'm just ranting at this point.
No, but you make a good point, and I think it also gets us to the other interesting thing that will it's already started to surface. Is this is not so much a Latino or a Latino issue, but actually could be seen given the fact that one of the biggest proponents or representatives of that perspective is Latina. So I'm also referring to sort of the perceived and real divide between progressive Democrats and the more moderate Democrats. So, of course, on the progressive side, thinking of some of the comments and reaction to what Congresswoman Alejandra Ocasio Cortez has said, and how it will be interesting to see what happens in the House and also within the administration, because obviously, if the Senate, which most likely will remain Republican, and we won't know that until early January when there's a special election to decide who wins those votes. But best case scenario, at least depending if you're a Democrat or Biden or a progressive person, best case scenario is that the Senate gets into Democratic hands, but even then, it will still be a very small margin both in the Senate and in the House. And I think it will be interesting to see what kind of policy directions the Democrats and the leadership will take, and particularly Biden will take. And I guess chances are there's probably going to be more of the middle of the road that some of the folks on the more left-leaning side of the spectrum would want to see. Or maybe we're surprised and maybe we see the Biden administration embrace some really progressive policies in critical aspects, whether it's the economy. I hear a rumor that, Senator Bernie Sanders is being considered for the Labor Department. I don't know if that's true or not, but that certainly would be an interesting thing if you have a Democratic, middle of the road Democratic president who decides to go progressive given everything that's happening in this current moment.
I'm going to make a prediction.
All right.
Knowing full well that if my predictions are incorrect, I won't really be too worried
La
about that.
desmientes.
I don't think much is going to change in the next 4 years. You're going to see a lot of political gridlock. Let's see how comfortable Joe Biden is with executive orders, because the Republicans are not going to let him do anything. Even if they win the 2 Senate seats in Georgia, and then they get the tiebreaker with the Kamala Harris, you still have to account for the conservative Democrats in the party. So it's not a sure thing that you're going to be able to pass any meaningful legislation. So I don't see anything substantial changing outside of whatever it is that you can do with executive orders.
Yeah. And I think, you know what? I think you may be right. But at the same time, I think that Biden is experienced enough and sort of in a point in his career where he could really say, you know what? I know there's these areas where we got to push and we got to push hard, and he could potentially be more aggressive if he wanted to on certain issues and certain policies, whether it's through administrative action or just really leveraging his power as president and the power of the veto. So I think he could also decide to be a more impactful president. Obviously, again, this is making a giant leap of faith and assumptions that he's going to go against his very essence and his very sort of trajectory as a politician. But I think it's a possibility that that could be. I don't know what the probability is. I want to say maybe 30%. Probably your scenario is probably 60 to 80%. Most likely, I guess I'll say 20% to give myself a little less cushion. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how everything unfolds.
The problem that I see with this new administration is that the the most important policy that they have to tackle is what to do about the economic relief that they need to offer for all these Americans that are suffering as a result of the pandemic.
Hmm.
And beyond that, they have to figure out how to deal with the economy because of the repercussions of having shut down for a whole year or even longer, depending on when the vaccines come out. And I think that's going to take priority over a lot of other issues. And in a way, it's convenient for the Democrats because they don't have to worry too much about immigration or healthcare, or they can at least push those to the side because they're going to have to
Yeah.
focus on what to do about stabilizing the economy. And so right now they're already in talks with the Republicans. The Democrats are throwing out numbers like 2 trillion in economic relief, right? And then the Republicans are coming back with saying, no, we could probably do like half. And that's going to go on for a while. And I mean, it can go on for too long because
And it's what happened.
the Americans need unemployment insurance, or they need other form of relief. but then beyond that, there's going to be a lot of repercussions, and they're going to have to figure out a way to fix that. So that's probably going to take up all of next year, maybe even the first 2 years of office, and then by that point, the Republicans will already be running, trying to get a bigger chunk of the House and the Senate. So again, I don't. It's just it's hard for me to see how anything meaningful changes when it comes to healthcare, to immigration, to foreign policy, to student loan. I mean, Joe Biden was already walking back or trying to weasel his way out of really providing any type of relief for students and for student loan debt. And he's throwing up figures like forgiving $10,000 in student loan relief, or if you work in a job in a low income community, then you get some benefits. But dude, $10,000 for kids that are graduating with anywhere from 40 to 80 or $120,000 in student loan relief. I mean, that's not going to help much.
That's true. But I think in some ways, the pandemic and the economic fallout are this catch 22 thing for the Democrats, because in some ways it puts the policy making, what's needed to be done in terms of the economic stimulus, in terms of the jobs, it puts those, it puts them on an area where they can really um, provide that stimulus and do those investments that benefit their core base, right? The folks who are low income, who are union, who are looking for jobs, are looking for that economic American dream. At the same time, having to spend all that money is going to complicate their abilities for them to pay to do other things, because there's already a considerable deficit. So it will be restrained because of that. And I'm sure that they're certainly not going to get as much money from the Republican conservative Senate as would be truly needed to make an effect. But nonetheless, they'll get something done, and if they're able to do some additional, well, first of all, if the ACA continues, if they can strengthen that, if they can maybe do some meaningful job legislation, implementing parts of of a new energy infrastructure, I think maybe, just maybe, they'll be able to get the economy going, and to a point where 2 years at the midterms, they'll be able to maybe gain more numbers and hopefully have more political juice to continue the rest of the agenda. Again, because I also expect a significant economic boom after the vaccines are distributed, and sort of things continue to come back to normal, because I think that there will be a need, there will be this desire to spend money, to go outside, to travel,
Mm-hmm.
which I think will stimulate the economy, not only here in the United States, but across the world.
Yeah, I think people are so exhausted of the last 4 years with Trump that they would welcome the opportunity to go back to the last 4 years of Obama. So even if we do exactly that, and
Hmm.
everything indicates that that's exactly what's going to happen, because even his cabinet picks are people that either previously worked under him or under Obama or under Hillary Clinton. So he's surrounding himself with just about the same type of people that Obama was surrounded with. And I don't know about Bernie Sanders. I don't know where to put those odds to see if he's going to put any progressives into meaningful cabinet positions.
Yeah.
We'll see. I wouldn't put it beyond the Democrats to completely snub the progressives and then just worry about us in 4 years. They probably think that they have a formula for 4 years for how to push us aside again, or whatever candidate we may have, and to push for another Democrat. We are coming. They get to ignore
No,
us for now. We'll see how much longer they get to ignore the progressives, but
no,
we are
you're
coming.
there. You're already there. You have so much influence already.
What they're afraid of is the progressives joining forces with the conservatives, with the right wing of the conservatives, the ones
Yeah.
that are anti-war, the
Yeah.
ones that are for Medicare for all now, and all that the progressives need to do, and these right wing guys, is put aside the stupid culture war culture wars and focus on the issues that affect both of them. And then if they could do that, then these guys are going to have a big problem on their hands. So they'll probably come up with ways to try to further divide progressives and conservatives. But yeah, the writing's on the wall. It's only a matter of time. That's my
Yeah,
perspective on
I
it.
good points. And I think at the same time, I think progressives have a lot more voice and heft this time around. I think because of Bernie Sanders and some of the other folks who have joined the progressive movement. And I do also think that since climate change, which is a strong progressive issue, is important, seems to be gaining importance both because of the need to address the issue, but more importantly because of the economic perspective of it, which President-elect Biden completely sees that the opportunity to create the jobs that are going to keep or get more people into the middle class to solidify that base for the Democratic Party for the future to come. So I think that at this point, progressives have a lot of I have a lot more influence. And the other big thing is because of Kamala Harris, there's a lot of California influence and that's going to be in the Congress actually. And when you think about it, I read this the other day when President-elect Biden or then President Biden gives his first State of the Union speech, he's going to have Nancy Pelosi, Congresswoman from California, and Kamala Harris, Vice President from California, Senator. So in some ways, of two women from California will be represented in that apex of power within the American government: the presidency, the vice presidency, and the Senate, which was the vice president proceeds over, and then the control over the House of Representatives. That's a powerful image.
Powerful image, but it's just an image, right? You have to look at who their
Hey, we were just talking about the patriarchy, man. This is you see women in control, power, boom, lideresas,
no,
chingonas.
that's important, man. But you have to look at who's backing them. Who are their corporate sponsors? Because that's ultimately
Yeah, they're a
that's
little
who
more
they'll respond
moderate.
to.
They're a little more moderate, but hey, man,
Yeah, we'll see.
progress is progress.
We'll see. So, what do you put the odds of Biden picking Sanders for his Secretary of Labor?
I thought that that was not going to be happen because I thought that, if I'm not mistaken, isn't the governor of Vermont a Republican? So my understanding was that things are so tight in the Senate. So maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe the governor in Vermont is a Democrat and would appoint a Democrat or Democrat-leaning independent. Because let's not forget that Governor Senator Sanders was an independent for the longest time. But I don't know. I think it will be interesting because in some ways the Department of Labor position is very powerful, but not as powerful as being a senator. I mean,
Right.
but
Yeah.
hey, it depends on what he wants to do, right? Or whether he feels that he'll be able to do some. I mean, you can do some amazing work within the Department of Labor. I mean, in terms of labor conditions, uh, a lot of stuff. But again, maybe he just wants to change things up and try that to implement change through that method, through that lens.
Yeah. To wrap up, if what I've said before is that if the Democrats cared about progressive values, they would have ran a progressive. Anything that they
Damn.
do afterwards is just symbolic.
Hmm.
Um,
But I think, and it's funny because you mentioned the cultural wars. So one is interesting because I think progressives, in my mind, sometimes are the ones that are more attuned to the cultural wars perspective of things. And I think, given the composition of the Supreme Court, I think cultural wars, things about abortion, healthcare, how the power of government, so many things, uh, segregation and race, all these things, so many things are going to be going up to the Supreme Court. So to highlight that, as you think that, minimize the cultural wars to focus on getting things done, but and the more progressive that can be, great. but at the same time, you have this phenomenon where there's going to be a lot of cultural war stuff happening in the years to come because of the new composition of the Supreme Court, and just because what's happening right now.
Yeah, yeah. The abortion issue is such a polarizing wedge issue. So I don't see progressives seeing eye to eye with conservatives on that anytime soon. But
Hmm.
if they can rally around some of the other common interests, then maybe they can get something done. But yeah, abortion unfortunately is a really difficult one for conservatives to let go of. I mean, it's the one
Mm.
single issue that a lot of them vote on. So we'll see how that plays out. And by the way, it's, interesting that you didn't mention that that's a woman in the Supreme Court now. No le das crédito when it's a woman that's
Ay,
going to
my
vote
bad.
against you.
No, I was getting ready to
You
do
gotta
that, but I
acknowledge the
wanted to
good
make
and the
sure that
bad,
you
man.
mentioned. No, but that's the thing. That's the irony, I guess you can be perceived. But again, maybe acknowledging that just like we ask people not to assume that Latinos vote a certain way or have a particular worldview, we shouldn't assume that women cannot have other worldviews,
Well,
as it relates to those types of issues.
I'll just put it out there that it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. It matters who's backing them and who it is that they have to represent when they're governing. And most of these politicians are representing corporations, other interests that are so far removed from the interests of the common people. And they'll use issues like abortion. They'll use issues that are wedge issues that are polarizing so that they can get the people to vote for them a certain way, but it doesn't really mean that they believe any of that stuff. They just do whatever it is that they need to do to benefit mainly corporate interests, right? So, yeah,
Yeah, I agree, and I think at the same time, I think that there's growing awareness that in addition to the political arena, the corporate arena is an area where also a lot of progressive policies and things are changing. And some may argue that there's more progressive things happening within corporate America now, with particularly when it comes to LGBTQ plus rights. For the most part, I think that it becomes a true economic power thing. Like, this is our business, this is what we're going to believe, and this is how we're going to treat people from this group. And then there's another interest that says this is what we believe and we're going to do something else, and then the marketplace can decide, okay, who has the right approach, who's able to get more investors or sell more products, whatever it is. So I think that there's also an increased sophistication of what's going on. And I think within corporate America, I think there's a battle to hopefully control the strings of power that you described to influence things for a better outcomes. Even in some respects, they could also be done to promote their interests, right? So you have billionaires who are promoting clean energy because they have the technology that they be able to sell to the government, and they're going to profit tremendously from that. So they just happen to position themselves differently within the market and with what's going on. So yeah, I think that it's a that's the other front of this battle, this war.
I will leave it when we can pressure Amazon to provide a living wage
Oh.
and to give mm, health benefits that are at least somewhat reasonable.
Yeah, and I think part is, government and consumers standing out, but then also the people like Walmart, right? And I know Walmart could be a controversial company within the community, but they're the ones that are positioning themselves and positioning as a counter to Amazon, and obviously there's other companies, but it also comes down to that too, right? The marketplace, the invisible hand.
Yeah, maybe you're way more optimistic about putting your hopes for change in a company like Walmart. We'll
So
see.
we got,
We'll see
baby.
how
So
that
we
plays
got.
out. Yeah. Okay. Let's. Any final thoughts on the post-election and everything that's going on around it?
No, just asking everybody to breathe, let it go, relax, accept where we are. I know that I think I know actually just yesterday news broke about the formal transition of power, so that's great.
Yeah.
Again, we were concerned about that, particularly as it came to a pandemic. While Herreo's man-child has not conceded yet, I think there's an acknowledgement that there's going to be a transition to power. There's still a lot of interesting things that can happen in the next 54 days or so before that transition takes place. But overall, I think that particularly all of you who may be listening and who have been on this road for maybe a year and a half. And as you know, we talk so much about politics. Kudos to you all for being informed, expanding your your perspective on the issues that were on the ballot that were so important in these elections, and also kudos to you for trying to be as informed citizen as you can be, or informed, yeah, for your civic participation. So kudos to you. Pat yourself in the back. Tomen aguardiente, celebren, porque you voted, you you let your voice be heard, and now the fun begins.
And don't worry, Donald Trump is not going anywhere. He'll be around and he'll find a way to try to remain relevant. Whether he's successful or
Yay!
not,
Love
that's yet to
it.
be determined. But he'll be around. This is a reality TV show for him. And
It's real life.
yeah, his life. And so he needs to stay in the spotlight. That's how he thrives. That's how he generates his income, by being in the spotlight,
Hmm.
by being a personality, by projecting something that he is not, right? So he needs to find a way to stay in the spotlight, to stay relevant, especially with so much money coming due.
That's true.
Okay, let's leave it at that. If you guys find these conversations interesting, don't forget to follow us on Brown Perspective on YouTube. We're also on Instagram and on Twitter. Nos vemos.
Ciao.